You're watching LMCC.
Good evening. I'm Peg DeBoard with the League of Women Voters of South Tonka, welcoming you to our annual Mayor's Forum. We're happy again to be partnering with the Lake Minnetonka Communication Commission. Just a little bit about the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is now 105 years old. The League is open to all genders starting at the age of 16. From the very beginning of our history, the League has been supported by men who contributed to our success and have many men who are members in the League. The League is nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose any candidate or political party. We believe that informed and engaged citizens are the cornerstone of our democracy. We conduct studies. That's kind of the fun thing about the League, is we study things in order to sort of arrive at positions based on our studies, and we use those positions to do advocacy work, advocating for change at all levels of government based on these studies. So the process for tonight, the forum will provide the panel with the opportunity to showcase their cities and inform the public about what is happening of interest in the South Tonka area. The questions being posed tonight have been submitted by the public. We will be taking questions from the audience. There are note cards if you'd like to use note cards in the back. Other than that, we'll probably just be asking questions. Now I'd like to introduce the panel. Adam Jennings is the mayor of Tonka Bay. Todd Carlson is the mayor of Excelsior. Thank you. Jennifer Labadie is the mayor of Shorewood. Tom Fletcher is the new mayor of Greenwood. And Adam Jennings and Dan Madsen is the city administrator for Deephaven. So let's begin. How does each city gather information from residents regarding major issues in the city? And Adam, how would you like to begin?
Sure. You know, we're kind of a pretty informal city. Tonka Bay is made up of about 1,450 people. If you were to take our land mass and squish it all together, we're about 1 square mile. So it's not necessarily sexy, but a lot of things happen word of mouth. We do have a Facebook page and a website. We do or have in the past sent out a regular newsletter, a printed newsletter for those individuals who don't necessarily have access to the internet as readily or feel as comfortable with it. And certainly emails and phone calls as well to the city. But we tend to keep it pretty casual, but are always open to new ideas as well.
Great. Todd?
Yeah, please. From Excelsior's perspective, yeah, we're very similar to what Adam just shared in Tonka Bay. Again, really a small community, 2,300 people, 1 square mile, really in size. And I like to think, and certainly when I'm in the community, I like to think of all of our residents as really, being close-knit, and Excelsior really being a community that's tied together informally. A lot of the communication that we do, again, is informal. We try to share as much as we can, either over the website, certainly at our city council meetings, always encouraging folks to come if they've got an item they want to speak on during open forum. And then also, too, through our newsletter. We do a newsletter twice a year where we share information of what's going on in the community. So, again, very similar to Tonka Bay, really kind of informal, a lot of word of mouth, and just a lot of residents talking to each other. So.
Hi, Jennifer Labadie, mayor of Shorewood. We have lots of ways that we engage residents and we hear their concerns and address them. Like the other cities, we have social media. We have a website that is actually being redeveloped and rebranded, and so be on the lookout for that. We have a lot of residents who attend our meetings, and with certain large projects, like large roads projects, we have recently started open house formats where we have an informal dialogue, and we also have diagrams that are posted and on display from our city engineer. We have matters from the floor, at every meeting, which is a 3-minute period that residents can get up and address their concerns to the council and the entire staff. And although no direction is taken that evening or no discussion is made that evening, council can direct staff to research the issue and to bring it back on a formal agenda or to reach out to the resident directly. We're also lucky that we have 2 commissions, the Park Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission, made up of volunteers from our city. Both the commissions, as well as our city council, contain people who are really active and involved. We're in all different civic groups. We're in different age brackets. Some of us have children in the schools. So just through our interaction within the community, I think between the 5 council members and the 10 commissioners, we encounter just a lot of people word of mouth. So yeah, that's how Shorewood does it.
Thanks.
On Greenwood's end, we don't really have much in the way of formal practices, maybe because we're 700 people. So we have, over the years, a couple times done surveys where everybody gets a survey and they turn it in. And that's actually worked well for some very specific issues. I always suggest that people come to matters from the floor. If you have something you're concerned about or a positive suggestion, because then you talk to the whole council, people have had very good effect in Greenwood with that. It can be very positive. And, and also the council lets, and partly because of our small size, I don't think Shorewood could do this, but every matter that we discuss, if somebody wants to, on the agenda, if somebody wants to speak to it, we let them speak to it. So, and address that item.
And Dan?
Thank you. I think that Deephaven would operate in the same way that most of the other cities up here do. We have a lot of community groups. We definitely have a park board, planning and zoning commission. We have a newly created events committee. We're looking forward to starting our first city event. That'll be a fun thing to plan with the community. In addition to our website and exploring social media options, we're active with our newsletter. It's quarterly, but we really try to reach out to our community groups to get their events, engage them, and then communicate what we're working on as a city to the public. We have used open houses for infrastructure projects, inviting people in the impacted area to come in, informally learn more about our project, and answer any questions that they may have. We've also used town hall type meetings when we have things that may be warranting more discussion or even slightly controversial in nature. We really try to reach out and invite everybody in to have those conversations and discussions. We also utilized some surveys in the past year to really make sure we were getting the word out to all of our residents and hearing back from them in a substantive way.
So the next question is, do you feel like you get enough feedback? And what are the ones that are working? What are the ways that your citizens are communicating back to you work the best, do you think?
I would say I think we get more than enough feedback. No, certainly. I'll just weigh in real quick. I didn't mean that. No. That's kind of tongue in cheek, but yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of the comment like, if you don't get criticism or you don't get feedback, you're not working hard enough. I mean, we don't tend to hear a lot of compliments or praise when you're doing the good things, but certainly if there's an issue that could be polarizing and you take a stance that maybe goes against that, you'll certainly hear from it. I think the biggest thing, though, that I would share is I think everybody certainly within our community, I think they trust the fact that the city council and their commissions are really working hard to do the right thing, and that their feedback does matter. So whether it is through open forum or is through a note to the website or an email to one of our email addresses through the city, I think there's just a real good and strong sense that they'll be listened to open and fairly, which I think is really credit to city staff and to our council. So just some thoughts from Excelsior.
I think Shorewood definitely gets enough feedback, too. In addition to the open houses that I mentioned earlier, we did have another method that we've employed a couple times where we take the meeting to a neighborhood. We did that in the Freeman Park neighborhood when we were discussing buckthorn and cleaning up the park. We did that in the Manor Park neighborhood several years ago when we were talking about maintaining their pond and cleaning up the pond. That's another method that really helps people get engaged and gets feedback from people impacted directly by that project. And then we also, all of us in these small cities, we don't have or at least Shorewood, we don't have computers for the council members. We don't have offices and cell phones and major personal assistants. So when someone calls, they're calling directly to the council member. They're calling directly to the mayor. And I think that's just part of being in a smaller city, that we are accessible.
Anybody else?
Tom Fletcher would just echo that. When you're a town of 700 people, 5 council members, I think we get good feedback, just by the number of council members in the community.
If I could add anything to the conversation, I would say maybe we should draw a distinction between feedback and engagement. I think when we make decisions, we hear from the public, whether they support it or would rather have us go in a different direction. What I'd like to see more of is engagement, the front-end proactive discussions when we're considering things that will impact everybody. That's really the best time for people to give us their thoughts and opinions so we can fully vet these opportunities.
I'll chime in a little bit, because I was thinking about, do we get enough feedback initially when you asked the question? And, certainly we do have a lot of word of mouth in Tonka Bay, but, I think specifically about one of our major infrastructure projects that we had this past year was along County Road 19, which is essentially our main street. And we definitely ran into a few issues from a construction standpoint during that process. And, we had some people who were on an email distribution list. We had different residents which were on a different email distribution list. There was some confusion at times. So there's certainly that standpoint. We're trying to figure out better ways to manage that in the future. But thinking about the engagement piece, city government tends to be very, very slow. And the process in which it works, a lot of times when we begin to talk about some of our projects, they're on our agenda, it's very open, but sometimes residents don't really know about it or it doesn't really seem to get traction until you're very far into the later stages of it. And I think at times there is a percentage of residents who they feel like somehow they were left out, even though we try to be as open as possible. And it would be nice to figure out an effective way to bring people in a little more holistically into that. And I think that's something that certainly Tonka Bay has struggled with, and we've discussed at some meetings, how to better engage that.
No, I was just going to make, I think that's a great comment, because typically Adam's absolutely right. I mean, you may get down into a project that when the start of your discussions begin, I mean, when you begin those discussions, really there's not a lot of people paying attention, but the longer things go on, or if an issue comes up, all of a sudden it becomes one of those, could be one of those cases where, why wasn't I informed of this, when in fact there's already been plenty of chance for feedback. But again, it's just trying to make sure that we've got that communication that people can access. So.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that too. So Shorewood has a master trail plan that was developed after many years of discussion, after many years of meetings, and really formalized, I believe, around 2016. It takes our city into 3 different phases. Well, we're still working on trails from phase 1. And so to anyone involved in the city and city government and the commissions, we feel, why wouldn't you have known about this document? Why wouldn't you have known about this concept? But until it's right in front of their house or right in the neighborhood they walk through, people may not pay attention, or our lives are all busy out here. And then we get feedback at the end of a project, like the mayors are saying, and for the people who are involved at the beginning, it can be quite frustrating. Shorewood's lucky we have numerous groups of residents as well as individuals who have started engaging with each other, engaging with the council, engaging with the commissioners, and they're coming in more at the beginning of projects, at the beginning of concepts, and that's making it easier, at times more frustrating, but it's a way that they're not chasing after the ball when it's already been kicked down the road. They're being involved right in the beginning of the process. So I like the difference between the engagement and the feedback.
So if you're thinking really hard, maybe, what are the major accomplishments that your city has had in the past year?
For the City of Excelsior, first of all, I really want to say thank you to City Council staff and to our residents. Coming off of 2023, in fact, I just wrote my spring newsletter, and I was reflecting on some of the work that we did, and it's just amazing to think of how much work gets done when you have a really, quite honestly, a very small staff and very small staff of public works employees. But for us in 2023, very proud of the historic designation for our downtown. We undertook the Commons concession project. We reconstructed that area in the Commons Park. We created a oak restoration project called the Oak Savannah Project. That's in the Commons as well. We began groundbreaking on a multi-unit housing complex as well as a new parking ramp, which is quite honestly going to be really transformational for our city. It's a project that the city is doing in conjunction with Red Leaf Partners and one of Minnesota's preeminent architects, Snow Krylik. I think it's a project that we'll be very proud of. It's certainly a project that has divided some of our community, right? Excelsior is a very old town going back to 1853. Some folks are welcoming the change. Certainly, I think the businesses are looking forward to some of the change that that's going to bring. But certainly, there's also, anytime you have change, there's those residents that have a difficulty with that as well. So I'm also really proud of the work that we've done in our Oak Hill Cemetery. I've challenged council and staff on our cemetery that we need to transform that parcel of land in our community. It should be a parcel like any of our other parks that people can enjoy, that they can go back and reflect in. It's got a great history to a lot of Excelsior's old residents, old-time residents from the beginning, and we really need to make Oak Hill Cemetery, I think, a parcel of land that we can be proud of, and quite honestly, that people will visit, just like they visit the Commons. A place to walk, a place to reflect, a place to enjoy. And then we just continue with our ongoing infrastructure projects, and we did a number of street projects last year. Those will be repeating this year, and we do that, and again, I'm really proud of the work that we do, and I highlight this. We're able to do that work and still maintain a AAA bond rating in terms of our financial stability. And that's not easy to do when you're a city of 2,300 people and you don't get a lot of funding from the state. And there's somebody here tonight I want to call out. It's Representative Myers, Andrew Myers. Thank you for joining us tonight. But want to say thank you to Representative Myers for all his support, not only on past projects, but also on upcoming projects that the city is considering. So it's good to have you here tonight, and we appreciate your standing behind Excelsior. So that's us for 2023. Lots coming for 2024, but I'll talk about that later.
Well, we have a lot of projects in Shorewood from the past year that I'm quite proud of. First of all, we have our Freeman Park. We redid all the trails in the park. And not only did we redo the trails, but we partnered with Three Rivers Park District. And with their partnership, we now have a trail from our main parking lot going up to the LRT trail. That trail will be identified as Three Rivers updates their literature and their website. That trail will be identified as a trailhead, which means people can come to our park, park their car, take their bike out of the car or off the rack, and hit the trail. So I'm really proud of that. We also had some major road reconstruction projects. Over half of Shorewood is still on wells, or right around half, I should say. So when we're doing major projects, that's the best time for our city to cost-effectively add things like water, sidewalks, improve the width of the road, add curb and gutter if so desired. Now, we don't do that with every single project. It's done on a street-by-street basis. But we had two really large projects that wrapped up, but they still have the final coat coming, and we still have some landscaping coming, so it'll green up and it'll look great. But that was the Birch Bluff Road project and the Strawberry Lane project. Both of those projects included curb and gutter. They included adding water lines. They included widening the roads. And then what I'm most proud of is Strawberry Lane also included a sidewalk that goes right into the mouth of Minnewaska Elementary School. It crosses the LRT trail, and it goes up to our Cathcart Park at the other end. So it's really a great trail to increase pedestrian usage, to increase biking to school, walking to school. Finally, our other large project, which wrapped up again, landscaping is still growing and it'll look better, is the Shorewood Ponds project. We had, this was a project that was designed to manage water and flooding and coals that my basement has flooded. Now, not this past couple years when we've had the drought. Think back a couple years. Those were really hard calls to get. Our city's a low-lying city, and the Shorewood Ponds Drainage Project was really designed to help the entire end of Shorewood around that area with the drainage and hopefully decrease and eliminate calls saying my basement's been flooded, my pictures are gone, my wedding dress is gone. So those are all projects I'm really proud of for Shorewood.
Well, from Greenwood's end, maybe nothing quite as exciting, but two things I can mention. One is we did a deal with our neighbors in Deephaven for them to do our public works, and that was a very good development, I think, hopefully for both cities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, it just, inter-city cooperation is a good thing, and we're very happy to be having Deephaven take over public works for Greenwood. So that was development number one. The other one is more multi-city development, and actually I think it affects all 5 cities. And it's not really a development, but I still think it kind of is important to share. I was at an operating committee meeting for the fire department, and the chief said, and people are not aware, we have duty crews, that people are now fighting for positions almost on duty crews, which is unheard of. In the days when fire departments are having troubles with staffing generally, we've done some things, Greenwood's part of them, encouraging them, we've done some things to help, and it seems like we've got a fire district that's successful, and 80% of fire calls are actually medical calls. You don't know you need a fire department until you need them. And that's to me, that development is a huge development that we've got really good staffing. By the way, what we're spending on firefighters is that budget. It's never been a budget before because people are showing up, and that's huge if you need them. And that's all 5 cities, that's huge.
Yep, that's a great point. Number one on my list actually was partnering with other cities. So we do partner with a couple of other cities for public works services or planning services, police, law enforcement. That's helpful, right? Especially when you have smaller lakes communities. There's so many assets that we could share, support each other. Fortunately, we were able to secure a Hennepin County Youth Sports Authority grant that will help us improve our village park. We also have a Harrelson Park project where we're looking at really expanding that whole area behind City Hall with a lot of different uses. It's a huge project, so that will certainly take time, but it's great to make progress on that. Additionally, we're really proud of the work we've been doing with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. We're working on securing grants to really get after stormwater treatment and improvement. That's one area where I think Deephaven is maybe a little underserved as our stormwater system. So really being able to do something with that stormwater control and treat it before it enters our lakes and aquifers is something that I think has been a great accomplishment over the past few years.
So from Tonka Bay's perspective, our primary theme has been infrastructure. I had mentioned earlier County Road 19. We were having a significant number of water main breaks along County Road 19. One year specifically, I'm not going to get the number exactly correct, but I think we had upwards of 12 to 13 breaks in a single year. And that's certainly, it's an inconvenience for residents to be without water, but it also presents a significant safety issue. Certainly when you have some residents who are at home and depend on that and don't have the ability to travel, but your fire hydrants are also out during that time. Now, granted, we did speak to the fire department whenever this happens. They do have a pumper truck. It's not as though we don't have services, but still, it's an issue. We were paying enough simply in repair costs that particular year to cover the principal and interest on a bond payment to fix the water line. We did receive a grant from the federal government, and I have to thank Congressman Phillips for pushing us through a few years ago that paid for well over half of the project. It was a $5.2 million project, and we received a $3 million grant for that. So that was extremely helpful and helped us to manage our tax levy in an effective way. In addition to that, for those of you who've driven down 19, we've also been doing quite a bit of work in Manitou Park. And right now, we're kind of in the middle of it. It's a multi-phase project, and it's looking a little rough right now. But a lot of that will actually be taken care of this spring, and there are good things to come there. And like Mayor Carlson had talked about, there's certainly more to come in 24 and 25, but I'll save that, so.
One more, if I could just share, and I think this is one that, as a group, we can all be proud of, and I give a lot of credit to Mayor Jennings, Mayor Labadie, former Mayor Kind, and now Mayor Fletcher from Greenwood, for the JPA agreement that we signed with the South Lake Minnetonka Police Department to just ensure that as a South Lake area, that we've got police coverage for the next 10 years. And that was, it was an agreement that, I think really shows the partnership between all the communities. And again, with these three mayors up here, their patience in working through, some of the discussion we had there, I think is a great testament to the fact that we're able to get that done and move that forward. And I think we've got a terrific public safety office with not only fire, but also with our police.
Yeah, that was a very lengthy process that involved a lot of negotiating back and forth. Shorewood's mayor prior to me was Mayor Scott Zerby. Scott Zerby had very, very great attendance of everything, but I was the mayors serve on the police coordinating committee, and I was the alternate while Mayor Zerby was the mayor. And there were 2 times in his whole tenure that he couldn't attend and I went in his place. The mayors haven't always been as agreeable on that board as they currently are. And we went back and forth because of course we're advocating for our cities, but we did it cordially. We did it with the concept of what was in the best interest of the entire SLMPD. And, we have one of the, if not the oldest JPA in the state. And I'm pretty proud of that. And, it's a great way for small communities like ours to have a robust full-time police department and a chief as competent and qualified as we have is by joining our forces and joining our resources for one unified police department.
So our next question, and Mayor Labadie, you can start with this one. So what kinds of development projects do you anticipate for the next couple of years?
Well, who knows what's coming? Shorewood doesn't have a lot of open land. Shorewood, and the open land that we have, it's not large tracts of land like some cities. We're also about 98, 99% residential. So large developments are not going to be what you would see in maybe Chanhassen, where they're developing a 20-acre parcel and adding in shopping and commercial. That's not Shorewood. Shorewood does have a couple different developments. We have the Walnut Grove development. It's off of Highway 7, turn north on Eureka Road. It's in that neighborhood kind of near Freeman Park. We have 14 homes going in there. Construction's underway. I'm not sure the completion date, but it's underway. We also have a new development called Maple Shores. That is kind of, as you're heading on Highway 7 going east, you may have noticed a historical marker over near Christmas Lake area. That area down there is now being developed with 7 units, 3 twin homes and 1 single-family home. And that unit is called Maple Shores, that development. So those are some of our current projects that are already underway. What's to come, I'm not sure. We also have the development on the old Truffle Hill property, but that's in conjunction with Tonka Bay. So I'll turn that over to Tonka Bay. The reason I say it's in conjunction, it was a really unique parcel of land. The chocolate shop, the former chocolate shop, is in Tonka Bay. The parking lot and the house that sat next to it are Shorewood. So for that development to occur, it had to go through 2 cities, planning commissions, 2 cities, city councils, and I'll turn that over to Mayor Jennings.
And we share water and sewer now, so we had to
Yep.
kind of figure out how were the bills going to work. From our perspective, that one was one that just kind of popped up out of the blue. Tonka Bay is largely fully built out, so we don't have a whole lot of development that goes on. The biggest thing that we have to contend with is we're a large cabin community, and we have, as the population continues to move westward, we have lots of folks that are interested in buying houses in our city, knocking them down, and building new ones. But back to Truffle Hill. That was a development that popped up. The owner of Truffle Hill had already made steps to move to Excelsior. And so the owner of the building, it was going to be a vacant building. They were trying to find a purchaser, someone to purchase that property for upwards of about 3 years, and they just weren't finding a whole lot of traction there. And those of you who are familiar with that building, it was cute, but it was difficult. If you were going to be a commercial business, it's kind of off to the side. It's very unique inside, and it was just very difficult for them to find a business to come in. So we, from a city perspective, we just thought rather than, have the tax burden on what would otherwise be a vacant building, and from a business perspective, there are businesses that could easily just walk away from that. This developer stepped forward, it made sense. We worked in conjunction with Shorewood and came up with kind of a win-win where another piece of feedback that we received from a lot of residents, Tonka Bay is an aging community that has begun to turn. There are a lot of empty nesters. They don't necessarily want to live in a 5,000 square foot home anymore. And the new complexes that'll be in there will be essentially townhomes. So they'll be split and smaller. And that's the type of housing that we've heard from some of our older residents and what they'd like to see more of. So.
And I'll just say that wasn't our only proposal that came to us. Other proposals came with that parcel that were rejected by the councils. One particular proposal, when our city looked at it, we asked, where's your driveway? Well, we're just going to use the Public Works driveway and go to our underneath garage for their multi-unit. How many units was that proposal?
I don't remember.
It was a lot.
It was a lot, and it also had a very institutional look
Yeah.
to it, so it didn't seem to fit.
And so this wasn't our only proposal that came to us. It was the one that made the most sense for our 2 communities.
Go ahead.
Sure. So, I probably should talk about development that I hope won't happen. In Greenwood resident preference, I think most people in Greenwood are just kind of happy the way things are in Greenwood, aren't looking for a big change. The Old Log Theater, as I think most people know, is closed, but the owners have indicated that their goal is to find someone who wants to lease it and operate as a theater and a restaurant, and I think from Greenwood's end, that would be a very good outcome, and that would be, I think for most folks in Greenwood, the preferred outcome is to have the Old Log essentially maintain as an old log or something similar. But that is always possibly up in the air. I mean, there's a lot of, stay tuned, is I guess the way I put it on that one.
Dan?
Sounds good. Deephaven is fully developed, so most of the projects are a lot like Tonka Bay. Maybe people are purchasing a property and then tearing down a house and building a new one. We are focusing on a different sort of a development, I suppose. We're really focusing on infrastructure, right? So repairing roads, we mentioned stormwater earlier. We're also working on walkability, and I know that's something that's important to all of our communities. We're engaging in some safe routes to schools projects as well. So hopefully we can keep moving that way to support the development that we have.
Let me jump in from Excelsior too. And I'm going to approach this topic from 2 areas that we'll be working on in 2024. In terms of projects, we've got a lot of, I think, really unique little projects, which I'm really proud of. Again, we've talked about the Oak Hill Cemetery. We'll continue to make improvements and do some work there. I'm really excited about the fact that we just approved a park, a playground. We call it the So High Park. It's actually down near the border of Shorewood, down on 3rd Avenue in the Division neighborhood. it's, what's unique for Excelsior is it's not the park in the middle of the village, right? And in Excelsior, you know, one of the statistics that I think a lot of people are surprised by is 61% of our residents live in apartments. And a lot of those apartments are congregated in the 3rd Avenue Division area, which is across, you know, Mill Street, kind of away, we call the village, but it's all Excelsior, but kind of, you know, again, down the street from Mill. So a lot of the kids that live in those apartments, certainly if they want to get to the Commons, you know, you have to cross Mill and you have to go through town, and, you know, it's a lot of work. So really proud of the work that we're going to be doing there. We're going to continue to make improvements to the Commons, really minor improvements now. You know, we did the big work with the pavilion, the big work with the concession stand. So a lot of, I think, some really unique which projects we can be part of. We do have some big projects that are on the horizon, right? We still have ongoing discussions about a hotel project in town, nothing that council is reviewing right now. We don't have any plans, we don't have any proposals, but that continues to stay out there. We'll be completing our parking ramp, which should come online the end of October. And then one of the other projects that we'll be starting to have conversation about is we need a new city hall. And the city hall that we had previously is now being reconstructed as part of the multi-unit housing project with the parking ramp. So we are in temporary quarters for now, and we're looking at options for a new city hall, whether purchasing a building or redeveloping one of our properties, perhaps down towards Public Works. So a lot of conversation about that to come.
Is there any updates on the Highway 7 corridor this year?
Yes. So last night, Mayor Fletcher and I, along with Mayor Lisa Whalen from Minnetrista and Mayor Brad Wearsome from Minnetonka, all testified in front of the Senate Transportation Commission. And it was a bill that was sponsored by Senator Kelly Morrison, seeking $100,000 towards the creation of a corridor coalition. Why were we looking for that money? MnDOT several years ago did a comprehensive study of the area and basically put improvements into short-term, mid-term, and long-term projects. The intersections of Shorewood are all in the mid to long term, anything of substance. Like the short term consists of trimming trees and improving sight lines, things like that. So we are really looking at improvements probably going out 10 to 15 years before we're going to have any major improvements. All the cities asked, MnDOT, how can we get this going quicker? And they suggested form a corridor coalition. That's the group, if you can unify as a group of mayors, of city engineers, come up with one direction, one big ask, one unified voice, we'll listen to you a little bit more. So, but to have a coalition like that involves, as I said, engineers. So that's expensive, it takes some money. So we were asking what we felt was a very reasonable ask to get this ball rolling. I'm going to let Mayor Fletcher talk a little, and then I'm going to come back in, because I'll cut right to the chase. We were denied the funding.
Well, I wasn't going to say this, but I don't know that we were denied. They said they would work on it, but Senator Morrison, I've never heard a senator say this, said that she thought the committee was being insensitive. Is that I wrote that word. She did. So maybe I took your thunder away. You know, I'll mention one thing in our favor. First of all, and by the way, I think Representative Myers has also been supporting this, and he had a meeting on this. So it's from both. I want to make it clear that both folks have been involved. But I don't think I've never heard a senator like Morrison tell her own committee that you folks are being insensitive to our needs here. So, anyways, so she believes in it, which is good. One thing that Greenwood is contributing is we got a new council member. One of the reasons I really supported him, he's one of the top safety engineers in the state, and he's already been put on the technical group. So Mike Marty, who's our newest council member, he works for SRF Engineering. He's a specialist in safety consulting on roads. So just FYI, that's going to be, I think that's also going to help us, just having this strong talent. This is what he focuses on for counties, state, whatever, basically for a council member's salary, which isn't you know, he does it for, because he wants to help. I'll turn it back to you.
So, yeah, this is really raw. It really stung. I brought up statistics from our SLMPD chief, who ran the numbers for us. In the past 26 months, the SLMPD has responded to 92 crashes along the 4.4-mile stretch that SLMPD has in their jurisdiction. That averages 3.5 crashes every month. The day before we testified, there was an accident at Williston and 7, closer to Famous Dave's. And a 17-year-old girl was broadsided. She's still in critical condition. She's in a coma, and it's touch and go. We need help. And one of the senators replied, we can't fund these coalitions. We've never done it before. Every coalition is suddenly going to come to us for funding. Then he proceeded to say that, think of the poor folks on a different highway who lobbied for 26 years to get the funding to form their coalition and to make the progress on their road. Was it 26 or 24? 20, a lot. And he mentioned that 4 times. And I just wanted to say, but this small amount, I mean, 100,000 is a lot of money, but this amount of funding, why would you want to wait 26 years? Think of how many more accidents we're going to have in 26 years when we're averaging 3.5 a month. Think of how many more deaths we're going to have. We're just asking for help to move this along. So it was extremely frustrating. I'll echo what what Mayor Fletcher said. Representative Myers and Representative Acomb from Minnetonka have both been supportive. They've drafted companion bills in the House. We did receive some funding last year to move this along, but we just want to move it along faster. They went one step, a different senator went one step away from basically suggesting we privately fundraise within our communities. Yeah. And like, what, a bake sale? You know, I mean, it was very frustrating, and but we're not giving up. So now it's back to the drawing board. Today I've already been talking to different corridor coalitions and their engineers. How did you fund yours? What did you do? What steps did you take? So now we just have to start looking in other directions, because we can't let them stop us, and we can't go on MnDOT's schedule.
Well, sorry.
And we're up against a big, big agency who's saying that in their eyes, there are other roads that take higher priority. That may be true according to their statistics, but this is our community, and this is what we are elected to do, is to fight for you guys and to represent you guys, and that's what we're doing. So.
And to echo Councilmember Marty, who's had a lot of experience with this, has said that we need to have the data, we need to get the data to also go for federal funding, et cetera, that this is very critical. The road needs it, and yeah, so we're not going to give up.
Yeah, and we formed our own coalition, even without that funding. So we've already met twice. We means the mayors along the whole strip. No, there's not a single mayor who opposes improvements to Highway 7. There's not a single mayor who's saying, mine deserves it more than yours, and we're not fighting. And the engineers from that whole corridor have met twice. Formal meetings, and we're trying our best, but the cities have no control or jurisdiction over Highway 7. It's a state highway. The most we could do would be close access at an intersection. All that's going to do is push it to the next intersection, which is also an uncontrolled intersection. So we're trying our best. Anything?
I think everybody's got the message, hopefully.
Yeah, it was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow last night.
Yeah.
So, Mayor Carlson, apparently that you had a survey done about a parking survey,
Yes.
and people are really excited and wanting to know what the results of your parking survey were.
We are too, yeah. So parking, let me say, parking is something that we revisit every year. I think what's different for this year is, again, I mentioned the parking ramp that we have coming online in October. And as part of that, we have undertaken a full city parking survey. And the intent of that survey is to really understand not only current needs, but what are the future needs for our community, and what is the best strategy to implement those needs, right? Parking revenue, and quite honestly, is one of the major sources of revenue for our little town. And I talked about that earlier. We don't get a lot of help from the state. 2,300 people, it's just difficult to raise the money that you need to have to do all the projects that we do and to maintain the AAA bond rating that we have. So parking is a big source of revenue, but you need to be able to balance parking right with the needs of your businesses. You need to be able to balance the parking with the needs of the visitors that come to your town, so you're not alienating, folks that want to come and visit and shop in your businesses and eat your restaurants. And you also need to balance, the needs of the residents, right, to try to take congestion off the streets. So we've undertaken a intense parking study. We're going to hear that we're going to hear that a couple, and I will invite, certainly Excelsior residents to tune in. In April, we'll hear the results and the recommendations of the initial study in April, and then we'll hear it again in May, a more formal presentation with a public hearing where folks can weigh in on what's being recommended. So certainly a hot topic. That's one of the hot topics for 2024 that I called out in my newsletter. And I'll say the other two right now because we'll talk about them later. The other short-term rental ordinance, and the final is, again, City Hall development.
So there's been a lot of federal and state infrastructure money being talked about. I'm just wondering if any of that money has gotten to any of the cities, and if it has, what have you used it for?
So Tonka Bay, I had mentioned this earlier. We had received a $3 million grant from the federal government, and we utilized it this past year, so we were granted that, I think, March, almost 2 years ago now. The one thing that I would say, just in grants in general, kind of at the federal level, because frankly, I was amazed. I was amazed when we got it. When we submitted the request, I figured we had a snowball's chance, and I had really put all of our focus kind of at the state level and was trying to work with the state legislature to maybe come up with something. But it's difficult to find funding for smaller cities. You have to meet kind of a certain threshold, and I don't remember what the exact number is from a population standpoint. Is it? And if you're below that, you're not eligible, which is kind of amazing because you think, to me anyway, if you're a smaller community, it's even harder for you sometimes to develop the revenue that you need in order to get things done, and you're kind of just automatically chopped out of the loop. But no, that's why it was so amazing and wonderful when we did hear the news that we had received that $3 million. Unfortunately, enough time had passed. The project was originally supposed to cost $3 million, but by the time we were able to get the project done, it fell kind of in that inflationary period of time, which I'm sure everyone's painfully aware of. The project had grown to 5.4 by the time it was all done. So we still had to take on some debt as a city, but we're getting it done. It should be done hopefully this upcoming year. We still have about a third of it left.
I'll just simply say that we're grateful for any help that we get, and we're certainly grateful. We received some federal funding for reconstruction of the historic St. Albans Bay Bridge. We received that in conjunction with Greenwood.
Well, you took the lead on it. Excelsior took the lead and got it. So let's give credit where credit is due.
Thank you very much. So we're happy about that. We're happy to have received some state aid, for really, which is really discretionary spending for public safety. Each of the communities has received some additional money that we can spend either with SLMPD or on our own to help improve safety in our towns. And we're always happy to receive any assistance we can receive and support. We've got a couple upcoming projects with infrastructure, and I mentioned our public works, where we currently have bonding proposals in front of the House and the Senate, And again, my thanks to Representative Myers and Senator Morrison for their support there, so.
Yeah, like Mayor Carlson said, that public safety dollars that came to each of the cities can also be used for the fire department too. And it came to each of the cities, so it's at our discretion how each city wants to use it, which is quite beneficial. For example, Shorewood, we've had major vandalism in our parks. If we want to upgrade some of our camera equipment, we could use some of that funding for that. Another thing to point out is that large cities like Rochester, Duluth, Minneapolis, St. Paul, they have grant writing teams. They have full-time people that's their whole job. Small cities, it's very hard to know what grants, to find the grants, to apply for the grants. This isn't anyone's full-time job in a small city. So when we do get money, it's like a Christmas present, because I mean, it's nothing we can count on during our budgetary season.
They said Green was just thankful for what Excelsior did. We didn't even know you were doing it, I don't think, until you got it done. So that was like, thank you.
Yeah, I would say in Deephaven, we're on the front end of pursuing both state and federal funding. Again, that Harrelson Park, Village Hall Park is a multi-million-dollar project, so it's going to take a lot more than our means just in Deephaven. But I'd also like to echo what I'm hearing and commend the legislature for the one-time first responder funding. That was, I think, a really great targeted allocation that allowed cities to utilize that funding in the best way for our communities. So I'd love to see more programs from the state level like that.
Been super fast. Just one. I was thinking about it strictly from a federal perspective. County dollars are out there as well. One thing that I've discovered in all of this, a lot of people don't know who their county commissioner is. It's just this kind of silent position that's out there that a lot of people don't know about. I mean, that's been my experience. But you look at the size of the budget that the county oversees, and it's upwards of, it's north of $2 billion. I mean, it's a huge, huge budget. But a lot of what's helped us with Manitou, actually, our park is a grant that we had received from the county in, I think it was roughly $200,000, so it was quite large. And the really nice thing about it was it actually, it didn't even come from tax levy dollars. It was due to the Twins Stadium. When they built it years ago, there was a provision built into that agreement, whereby the Twins have to provide a certain amount of funds each year, and those then get allocated for park improvement. And so those were the dollars that we were able to receive at that level as well. So the county, there's kind of a county level and a state level and a federal level, and try to go wherever you can. So.
Just a minor plug. The League did a study 2 years ago on Metro County government. So if you'd like a copy, I'd be happy to send it to you.
That'd be great. Yeah.
It was really quite fascinating, actually. So what, Mayor Fletcher, I think we're going to start with you this time. So are there, like, the question is, are there any public safety issues that your community is facing?
We share police departments we already talked about with 4 of the cities. So probably the safety issues that Greenwood faces, and I know, like, downtown Excelsior is a little different and so forth, but I don't know that we're facing, first of all, I think we have a very good police department. We have great officers, we got a great chief. I think we are, for the 4 cities, that's my personal opinion, are well positioned. Mayor Carlson mentioned we got the JPA done, so there's some stability there for the department. Challenges we're facing, so, and by the way, police stops, or police in Greenwood, the number of police incidents where police are involved are way up from a year or 2 ago. The reason is, and I'm sure it's every city, is because our police are being more proactive. At least in Greenwood, we've gone, hey, we like you folks being out there. We like you watching Highway 7 for speeders. We like you, they're very aggressive on going after DUI, drunk driving. So what's happening is it's more proactive stops. It's not that crime is increasing, it's more that the police are being very proactive. So key challenges, I think our department's well positioned. The 2 things, I think a lot of the issues that you hear about in elsewhere are coming out our way, and we need to be doing exactly what we're doing in terms of having a good department, a solid department. And number two, the drug issue. I was at Mayor Lampney and I were at the recognition thing for the drug area drug task force. Fentanyl is huge. I had a literally next door neighbor die from a fentanyl overdose. This is very real. It is, I mean, there are people, I'm sorry, from opioid overdoses. This is very real, and according to our officers, it is only growing. So I think the whole drug issue, mental health and drugs are huge issues for our communities, and if you don't believe it, I'm sorry, it's real. Sorry, I maybe talked too long.
Absolutely. The city of Deephaven is in a slightly different position. We have our own police department. I think leading up to the last few years, officer recruitment and retention was a challenge. It's a difficult time to train, hire, and retain quality officers. Fortunately, I believe Chief Johnson's done an amazing job with our team, and we have a fully staffed police department with officers that are engaged, so that's been a blessing. An internal challenge we've had is focusing on the community engagement part of law enforcement. Deephaven doesn't have a large crime epidemic, which is a godsend, and we're very fortunate, blessed to be in that position. But what do we do with that? So how do we engage, train up, and promote our officers and have them become more of a community partner, right? Get them out in the community doing things aside from just basic traffic stops. So that's been a 2024 challenge that we've laid down for our police. How can we get them active and engaged with our residents?
From Tonka Bay's perspective, strictly police force, when you take a look at our reports, upwards of high 90s in our percentage we're in the high 90s in our percentages. A lot of our calls are medicals. So that's probably the greatest need for the police force. But that being said, I do want to echo the importance, that Tom had brought up about being part of the drug task force. This is actually something that's relatively new. The new chief had come in. We had hired an additional officer because as part of being part of the, to be in the task force, you essentially have to provide an FTE because you're helping other cities. And that came at a cost, and we discussed it as a coordinating committee, and we opted to do it. The drug task force that we were initially going to be part of ultimately ended up fusing with another drug task force so that we have, the best way for us to fight the fentanyl, which is a huge issue in our area, and it's silent, and I think it just kind of creeps underneath everything and goes about its way. You have to get the guys at the top, and that's what the drug task force does. It works to basically take out the distributors so that you can actually get things off the street, and the dealers won't know where to go to get any product. So.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in on something that's completely at the other end of the spectrum, right? We've talked about the drug task force and the work that SLMPD is doing, terrific work. It's work that's, really in many cases behind the scenes and you don't have a lot of visibility into. At the other end of the spectrum, one thing you do have a lot of visibility into, and we had it last summer, and again, this isn't to minimize just the discussion that we've just had, but I'll just go back to e-bikes, right? E-bikes were a hot topic for, I think, all cities last summer. It's been quiet, of course, over the winter months, but I anticipate that that issue might pop itself back up this spring and summer. The good news, I know we're getting support from the legislature to perhaps change some of the rules around e-bikes and how they're viewed. But for Excelsior, it was a very a big issue. One, just with the amount of traffic that we do get in our downtown during the summer months, especially around special events, and with the sheer number of e-bikes that we had last year, we really did have some very dangerous situations. So the other thing that would be challenging, challenging to Excelsior again in the summer months is, sometimes we have some bad actors that show up late at night, in our parks, similar to Shorewood, and just trying to maintain and keep a balance on that.
Mayor Fletcher and I were just chuckling because the hearing before us was all about e-bikes yesterday in front of the Senate Transportation Commission, and that went over an hour. Ours was 18 minutes, including 4 mayors testifying. So,
I mean,
yeah.
the magnitude of what you're talking about.
And it was quite clear from the questions that were being asked by the Senate Transportation Commission that they don't understand e-bikes. They don't understand, they were asking a lot of questions. But anyway, that's a tangent. That's why we were chuckling. Our chief, we are in a really fortunate situation where the SLMPD is one of the few police departments that is fully staffed. And when we have openings, we have multiple applicants for one spot. There are, Minneapolis PD is still down like 80 officers, 100 officers, I don't even know. There are so many police departments that they're running the ones who are still employed by them overtime hours because they don't even have enough people to staff it. We not only have a fully staffed department, we have people waiting to join our police department. One of the reasons is because Chief Tholen has created positions like the detectives. We have 2 detectives, like the drug task force position. The drug task force officer can only be in that spot for a maximum of 3 years. It's basically an undercover spot, so they need to rotate them in and out. These are really great opportunities for young cops coming right out of police school or the academy or coming from smaller departments to our department. We've also recently joined forces with other departments, and we have an embedded social worker. So now when our cops are going to a call that's a mental health call, they can have the social worker reach out to the family. If it's a domestic incident, if it's an assault issue, there's underlying issues behind why that happened. And having this embedded social worker is a way that our department can address this more than just from a punitive standpoint. We can address the root cause of the problem. So that's another development in our department as well.
Oh, that is a great model, for sure. Sure.
To follow up on Mayor Carlson's comment on e-bikes, I believe Senator Morrison is going to introduce legislation which is different from what was talked about last night. There was amendments she withdrew, and that is actually to address some of the issues that we all are seeing, Excelsior in particular, on e-bikes, that specific legislation. And by the way, we'll have support because it's in their friggin' policies, and I got it in there for the League of Cities. I got it in their policies last year for this stuff, along with our chief of police consultation. So just FYI. I don't know if it'll get anywhere, but stay tuned. We're hoping. Yeah. And it will be, incrementally it would be helpful in terms of some better safety on those.
I know your cities are pretty well built up relative to housing, but the question tonight would be, have you instituted any new regulations or restrictions within your city relative to housing? And if you could also talk about short-term housing rentals, what your cities are doing relative to that. So it's kind of a twofold question, but see, Administrator Madsen, you're up.
I think most of our focus has been on reviewing our zoning code, looking at what type of homes, how much hardcover is appropriate per lot, how that's going to impact the impervious surface, stormwater runoff, again, look at densities and how those play out in our neighborhoods. Deephaven, like a lot of lakes communities, has a lot of narrow roads, not a lot of road parking. So a lot of these things are reviewed and re-reviewed as we move forward. And as people's interests in houses change and they buy lots and build new homes, we want to make sure that we're really staying with the character of the neighborhoods while still trying to provide people with the type of home they want to build. So that's kind of our current push as it relates to zoning.
So for Tonka Bay, right now we're in the process of reviewing and revamping our entire code. It's over time, we were a village several decades ago, and I think over time we've had things just kind of bolted onto our code, and it's kind of turned into this Frankenstein to some degree, where it even contradicts itself in places and isn't vague in other places, and it creates issues for The residents who are looking for clear guidance. It creates issues, for the city staff that are trying to provide that guidance. We get questions that come up to the council, and we want to go through and we want to try and simplify things and standardize everything. So more to come on that, essentially. We are taking a close look at our hardcover as well. Probably a majority of the lots in our community are non-conforming. So we struggle a lot with the state mandate of a 25% requirement for conforming lots. And we've submitted a plan to the DNR, who's currently reviewing that. It was a formula that we had developed to help standardize things and, again, just make any projects that residents want to do, simpler for the contractors to understand, simpler for the staff to direct those contractors. And I guess finally, from a short-term rental standpoint, this was an issue that came up to us probably 3 or 4 years ago. Early on, we had a problematic house that had been purchased by someone that didn't live in the community. They purchased it simply to be a short-term rental, and it created a lot of issues. They were, they were renting it out to frat houses and wedding parties, and 20 vehicles would descend on the lawn, and it just created a great deal of unrest on this particular street. And ultimately, what we did, there was a strong commitment to free property rights at the council at the time, and we basically said that we are okay with short-term rentals being in our community. However, we want the owners of those homes to have a vested interest so that you can only do it in the event that you are homesteaded. And so that way, if, say, you're a winter bird or you only live in your home part-time, it's still your home. So you can do with it as you please. And there are a number of other rules that go in place so that if for some reason you have a bad actor, you can take that license away. But that was our approach.
Okay.
Yeah, from Excelsior's perspective, I mentioned parking, something we revisit every year. The other topic we revisit every year is our residential guidelines and ordinances. And what I will say is this year, we're very strict in what we try to maintain within our community. A lot of that is, I think we all understand that from a council perspective, that we've got a very unique community with a lot of character, and we are certainly trying to maintain that the best we can. And some of the work that we've done this year when we're re-looking at the guidelines again is we've reduced height again. And I'll go back, when I first joined the council, you could build a house up to 35 feet in height. We reduced it a few years ago to 32. Now it's reduced to 28. We've modified some of our setbacks again to make them larger setbacks on the sides so that you have more blue and green space between properties. And one of the other issues that we've really worked hard on is working to really try to define how do you measure grade. So where do you start your building project from? And that was something that we really hadn't defined over the course of the last few years. And as a result, you would have builders and developers that would perhaps take liberty or raise the grade from the sidewalk based on where they're building the property, which could give them then a property that seemed to be taller than the houses next to it. So I would say zoning and housing ordinances are an ongoing discussion for our community. It's certainly a balance, as we all know. I mean, you don't want to do something that have unintended consequences, but again, you go forward every year trying to do the best you can. Regarding short-term rentals, this is a topic that I am going to invite all Excelsior residents to certainly pay attention to as we keep going. We've actually been talking about short-term rentals for about the last 5 months. We've had 2 public hearings on it, and I will say that it continues to be a moving target, right? Right now in town, we do not have any formal ordinances in place for or against short-term rentals. And I was quite honestly amazed to know that we've got over 25 properties in town, probably closer, even over 30, that are being used as such. And so, again, it's all a balance, right? Do you do nothing and let them continue to operate as they are, because we really haven't had any issues? Do you swing to the other end of the spectrum and prohibit them altogether? Or I think something that we're, certainly trying to find is you find that middle ground, and what does that look like? And quite honestly, after 5 months, we still haven't found out what it looks like. So we're going to be talking short-term rental ordinance again in April and again in May, and hopefully get to some decision here in early second quarter.
Great, thanks.
I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of pivot the conversation because we're ticking on in the time. And Councilmember, I keep calling you Councilmember, Mayor Fletcher, we've worked together a long time. And I wanted this as an opportunity to discuss with everyone the missing middle bill that's being proposed at both the Senate and the House. I'll give a general overview. Mayor Fletcher will give you some more specific details. This morning I was at the Day on the Hill. It's a educational day the League of Minnesota Cities provides for elected leaders, where they go over all the new and proposed legislation that the current bills that are being argued and things like that. And this missing middle it's really quite scary. It is a way that the state will control how cities look, because they are proposing taking away public hearings. They're proposing there will be categories where if it's a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, a whatever 5-plex is, up to a 6-plex, that we can't regulate it out. They're proposing certain minimums for land. In other words, our large lots out here may disappear. And the cities will have very little control over these issues. What's really scary is these bills are moving very quickly through the Senate and the House. The reason why is they have bipartisan support, and nothing at the state level has bipartisan support. They have bipartisan support from the far liberal housing advocates, and they have bipartisan support from the far right construction unions, the developers, and they're all agreeing we need more housing. They want it, the far left wants it because they want more housing for people. They want it because they can make some more money on it. Everyone wins in their opinion. And these are really, really dangerous concepts. I encourage you to look these bills up. I don't have the numbers. And write your state rep, Andrew Myers, who was here earlier tonight. Write Kelly Morrison. Write, if you're coming from Chanhassen, Senator Coleman, Representative Ream. Write them and call them and squawk about this and make some noise, because this is going to, if this passes, take complete control away from cities to do exactly what Peg was asking us about, which is control how our own cities look. What works in Minneapolis doesn't necessarily work in Brainerd, Shorewood, Tonka Bay. It doesn't. We're not all the same. So, Councilmember Fletcher, I know we were itching to talk about this.
Well, I think it is the absolute biggest issue facing us as cities. And by the way, when it faces us as cities, it affects our residents, okay? I mean, the biggest thing, when I have Greenwood Council is generally pretty quiet. Typically, no one shows up. But when it's a zoning thing, that's when people show up, because it affects their homes, it affects where they live. So it is a big deal. I've never had anybody show up at our council about police, about fire, but zoning, variances, conditional use, any zoning stuff, that's where folks show up. So guess what? It is real. First, I'm going to give a quick thing, because I am in the housing business, not as developer. I manage and own and manage rental housing, so I'm familiar with it. The mayor of Deephaven is actually a significant developer of housing, and he is, by the way, totally opposed to this bill, thinks it's as nuts as I do, and Mayor Labadie does. And I'll tell you why, because he has more experience, we both agree. It won't even solve the problem they want to address. It won't do it. The issues are not the cities. This thing presumes that the cities are all the bad guys, this bill. And if we just get the cities to do this, I'm going to get into detail real quick, that you'll help solve the problem. It won't solve the real problems out there with housing. I'm sorry, it won't even move the needle, but it will not, it'll be totally counterproductive from a city end. Let me just read one piece of the House File 4009, which I believe is the most recent version. I pulled it off a couple days ago. Let me just read this, and I'll read it kind of slowly because I talk fast. And this illustrates where this thing is going. Model ordinance. On or before December 31st, 2024, the Commissioner of the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency must develop and publish a model ordinance for adoption by cities that addresses the requirements of this section. On or before July 1st, 2025, a city must adopt the model ordinance under the subdivision or amend its official controls to be consistent with the requirements of this section as part of an alternative density plan under subdivision 16. Now, I could go through all the details of what's bad here, but I will assure you, when you dive into the details, what you were talking about in fine-tuning, this will just be like the Mack truck or whatever you call it hitting your cities in terms of control. And we ought to, in my mind, if this passes in any form, and there's attempts to water it down, Representative Myers made some changes at a committee, but this thing is so bad, it's like you make it a little better, it just needs to go away, because residents will be coming to us going, well, this is horrible, and we're going to go, our hands are tied. The state made us do this, and the state almost ought to take over at that point, literally should just be in charge of the zoning and planning, and you go complain to your senator or your representative if you have issues about how it looks. They should, if they're going to dictate the details, then they should take responsibility in my mind. And I know that sounds far-fetched, but this is, and by the way, the League of Cities is totally against this. I'm sure, in general, yeah.
It begs the question too. It effectively renders a lot of our positions ineffective. There's not, a big percentage of what we do as a council is zoning, and if we don't have control over that, what are we doing?
Well,
Yeah.
solving the lack of housing is such a large problem. You can't just dictate it away with numbers and requirements. So now suddenly we have a lot of people out here, if this goes through, we have no public bus lines. We have about half of Shorewood is still on wells. So are we going to build out infrastructure to put these new large sixplexes and fourplexes on our city water? Are we going to increase our police and fire and our EMS? It's such, we need housing throughout the state of Minnesota, but ramming restrictions and mandates down every single city's throat when every single city is unique. And a big factor is we have no busing. So.
Yeah, I want to just weigh in real quick, and I'm so glad, Mayor Laverty, that you raised this, because it's a critical issue. It's one that's really got me fired up as well. And I was asked, could we write a letter of, opposing these bills? And I said, I don't even need to write a letter. I'll write you one sentence. You're overstepping. it's a complete overstep of the state into local politics. And when you have a bill that, if you read the bill would essentially says you can build a house as tall as the tallest building in your downtown. So if you have a four-story building, and unfortunately in Excelsior we don't, right, with our historic district, but if some community has a 3 or 4-story building downtown and somebody wants to buy the property next to it, maybe downtown, they can build a 4-story house downtown. It doesn't make any sense.
So the League of Minnesota Cities has been overwhelmed with calls, and they pressed that on to their state leaders. Boy, they started getting meetings, the calls, because advocating and calling the right people and letting them know how you feel, it does work, especially when every single member of the House is on the election ballot in November. So,
In your wrap-up, if you could address, if you're doing anything on climate change in your city, that would be great. If you're not, that's great too, but Mayor Jennings, would you like to start the wrap-up?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank the league. Peg, thank you for taking the time and putting things together. I'd like to thank everyone who's attending tonight. It's important. The engagement is important. I'd like to thank my fellow attendees. I really wish I did have a good answer for you with regards to focusing specifically on the environment, but we really don't. We're not too. I think the big thing, what I was going to talk about, we have a number of big projects that are coming up that I was proud. For Tonka Bay, it's all about infrastructure right now. It's our roads, our water lines, our sewer. It's all around from the 60s. It's been crumbling and breaking. It needs to be fixed. Our first step was to do the main water line, which is going to get wrapped up this year. But we're also undertaking a pretty significant initiative in 2024, so we should break ground here in the next few months, where we're going to be doing Brentwood, Birch Bluff, and Pleasant Avenues, which Birch Bluff and Pleasant represent two of the biggest thoroughfares for our city. So there's a lot of traffic that goes through there, and it's significant. And we have another large project teed up for 2025 already. And a big part of our job in this upcoming year, when we start to talk about longer-term planning, is just to put together the capital investment plan for 2026 and beyond. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The one thing that we are doing that's pro-environment with all of this is that, one, we're going to be helping our I&I, so that's the contamination in the water that goes back that needs to be treated. In addition to that, we will be, in some places, putting in curb and gutter to help more effectively manage our stormwater treatment, so that's good for the lake. And it also helps just the houses in general, and when it's done, it should look really good, too. So, but yeah, we're doing a lot of really good work. I'm really, really happy with the council that we have right now. We work really well together. I think we're getting a lot of things done, and the parks are going to look great, and I'm taking too much time. So thank you for coming out.
Yeah, it's all good. From Excelsior's perspective, again, thanks to the league, and thanks for those that attended this evening, as well as those who are watching. Real quick before my summary, just regarding climate and things that, that perhaps we can do to help the environment in Excelsior. Certainly, we're a bee-friendly, bee-safe community. We will have actually a study coming up regarding use of pesticides in Excelsior. We'll be seeing that, I believe, here in April as well. One of the things that you may not know in Excelsior is we adopted, actually about a year and a half ago, a water moratorium. Even when we didn't need to adopt a water moratorium, we have one in town, which basically encourages residents to only water and sprinkle, whether they have odd or even address. So we're trying to make sure that we certainly conserve water wherever we can. And as Mayor Jennings mentioned, anytime we do an infrastructure project, looking to add curb and gutter so we can control runoff that goes into Lake Minnetonka. From a summary perspective, I covered a lot tonight on the city. I think my overall comments are, extremely busy in 2023, going to be even busier in 2024. Projects that we look to do, some can be transformational, but please know that we always try to find a balance. And just as your elected representative, whether it's myself or your council members, reach out if you have any questions. We're always happy to chat. We may not always agree, but again, part of the conversation is about getting to the best result and outcome. So a lot of great work to come ahead. We've covered most of it tonight, so I'll turn it to Mayor Labadie.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of the measures that the other mayors have already highlighted, Shorewood also does, curb and gutter, et cetera. We've also started replacing some of our water meters. Some of our water meters were not reading accurately, and some were being estimated. And when some of the people realize how much water they're actually using, it is, in effect, increasing water conservation, let's say it that way. The city of Shorewood has a representative on the Lake Minnetonka Conservation District. That's an organization, I think most of us have a representative on that. They deal with issues all about Lake Minnetonka, including things like curly leaf milfoil, zebra mussels, lake conservation issues. So by having that representative at those meetings, she comes back to us with the information they're talking about. That's quite helpful. We also have an annual tree sale where we offer trees basically at cost to residents of trees that are native to this area that have a good chance of growing. And then We had received a grant to remove buckthorn in Freeman Park a while back. We have finally acted on that grant. We cut down a lot of the buckthorn, and we are going to be hauling out some of the downed larger stumps and branches with some volunteers. We'll see how that goes. We're also planning to plant native grasses, native trees as we get this buckthorn under control. But anyone who's dealt with buckthorn knows that's a multi-year, very laborious plan. The Shorewood ponding area that I spoke about earlier, and when I said be patient, it'll look good soon, some of those grasses and the plantings around the pond area are also native Minnesota wildflowers, grasses. So that's a way we've helped the environment as well.
Okay, Greenwood doesn't have tons of efforts, except we do have I think a very strong tree ordinance which protects trees. My favorite story is we have a resident who did a house and had these tree requirements and loved it so much she planted a lot of trees on St. Albans Bay Road right across from Shorewood. And if anybody's ever driven by at Christmas and she puts all the lights on the trees, it's quite something, all these fir trees on St. Albans Bay Road. And she thought we were doing such a good job, she just did it about 5 times over. And, you know, but hey, you know what? If you start with something and we do, so, you know, the tree ordinance. I do also, as long as we're on that, I think stormwater is going to become, Dan had mentioned this, is becoming an increasing issue. I was at actually Mayor Labadie, I think it was the same presentation I was at from the state climatologist, who basically said we have, the state, you can argue climate change, I'm a believer in it, but okay, we ignore the debate about is it real, is it isn't. The reality is that we are having more severe rain events. It's just a fact. They are here in Minnesota. This isn't national. In Minnesota, we're having more severe rain events now than we did 20, 30, or 50 years ago. So, and it's not going to change. So stormwater is not going to go away as an issue. Okay, so Deephaven's being very smart. Okay, so by the way, thank you to the league if I didn't already say that. And I'm going to just use my closing to hit on one issue that wasn't asked about. I apologize, but it affects everybody. EMS response. Not from fire and police, they're great. The ambulance service in our area, not so good. Hennepin EMS, which covers most of us. Now, if you're on Ridgeview, I think you do better in Shorewood, okay? If you looked at the times, and if you're in Tonka Bay in particular, you get the worst response times. Our fire department is typically on the scene within 6 minutes. You could be a code 3, which is life-threatening emergency, and you could see times in excess of 15 minutes for an ambulance to arrive and the paramedics to arrive. It is an issue not just for us. Fire departments all over the area are up in arms, not just for us, but for in general. And so just FYI, stay tuned. And if you're talking to your representatives and senators, you might, or EMS people, or Hennepin County commissioner, new commissioner, whoever's selected, what about, they run the EMS for most of the area. What about EMS response for our area, which is where we all live? Okay? It's a big issue. Yeah. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you to the league for putting this on. This is a great forum, great opportunity to connect with people and to talk to all the mayors and the Lakes communities. It's fantastic. Thank you for my ability to be here. Mayor Kent Carlson is out of state, but it was important to him and our council that we had some representative here to speak for Deephaven. So thank you for that. I think at Deephaven we're trying to operate on a small scale and do the best that we can. We're focusing on invasive species like a lot of the communities are up here, whether it's treating emerald ash borer, getting rid of the trees that have already died, working on getting rid of buckthorn, or working with LMCD, having representatives that serve on that is very helpful. I alluded earlier to our focus on stormwater management and treatment. We have 2 grants that we've received. One is for the Montgomery area and Calvary Church. The other is for St. Louis Bay, to really try to contain and treat that stormwater before it enters the lakes or our aquifer and water system. And then, much like Tonka Bay, we passed an ordinance recently on inflow and infiltration, I&I. So anytime we have a road project that triggers our televising of our mains and the private laterals, and if they show evidence of inflow or infiltration, we will have those lined or repaired. That really takes some of the stormwater out of entering our wastewater system, being unnecessarily treated, doing damage to our infrastructure. So some of those things, and then hopefully, as all of our communities are focused, it starts to make a greater impact on the regional and hopefully ultimate environment.
I guess I would like to really thank the panel. You know, it's always great to see you every year. It's a fun night. It's so great to see how you work together and how we all benefit from your working together. I'd like to thank Mount Calvary for letting us use their facility. It's a great place and has worked out well. Thank the audience for coming and for your participation. This wraps up another Mayor's Forum for 2024.